I'm sitting here today with two of my good friends, world-renowned psychic medium and Métis elder Derrick Whiteskycloud and researcher Sebastien Martin. Now, we have an absolutely fascinating story to share with all of you, and it began over at the Architects of the New Paradigm Conference here in Vancouver, Canada. Now, in the previous months leading up to the conference, I had released an article called In Search of Evidence for Extraterrestrials, where I'd mentioned Derrick Whiteskycloud as an ET contactee. And I'd also presented on him at the conference. But what I didn't know is that there would be someone at this conference that was from a completely different continent that had a very similar experience with the very same beings. Sebastian, do you want to tell your story about how this took place?
Sure. So my story started in 2011 when I was in my house. I woke up one morning and I basically remember the face that was not human-like. It was humanoid. He had like high cheekbones, big eyes, and a very bright smile that was not a natural smile. It was forced. And so that kind of shocked me at first. And it seemed that he recognized me more than I recognized him. So it kind of made me wonder, what this was. So right away, as a businessman, I wasn't really paying attention to the ET world or to UFOs. For me, it was just a dream. And so I went to work that day, and that was in November of 2011. And when I went to my office, I could still see this face, all day long. So it was in my field of vision. I could see him very clearly, and it was bothering me. It was disturbing me during the day. So when I came back home, I decided after dinner, my wife went to bed with our daughter, and I decided to sit down on the sofa and to just come at peace with that, being or that vision or something. So I sat down and I closed my eyes for like a few seconds. I poured myself a cup of tea in the kitchen beforehand, thinking that I would just sip like a chamomile tea just after that, like quick meditation. And when I closed my eyes, I could feel this whirlwind all around me, going in a anti-clockwise pattern, and then it stopped. So I opened my eyes, and when I opened my eyes, there was this being right in front of me, and he was probably from the same distance as I would say, 20 feet. And I was looking at him, and I was transfixed. Like I could not move my hands, my body. I could not move my eyes. I was basically literally frozen. And I slightly panicked in my head. I was thinking, who are you? What are you doing in my house? Like all I was thinking first was an invasion, and not like ET invasion, but like a home invasion. And as I was looking at him, I could see this blue glow around his body. And the room itself was pretty dark in my living room. I had a 17 feet high ceiling in my house at the time. I moved since. And I looked at him, and right away I felt at peace. But he was speaking to me telepathically. And right away he said, my name is Zoar, like Z-O-A-R. And I said, I'm from the Galactic Federation, or the Galactic Alliance was the term. I do apologize, it's been a long time. But the fact is that I couldn't move, and I was transfixed, and I didn't know who he was. I could describe him. He was like 6'2", 6'3", not that huge, not like overly sized, but he was muscular in shape. I would say like a Californian dude. Like he was very good looking, like a wavy hair, and he was wearing this blue outfit that was very tight fitting, and a blue uniform. And I could not see anything apart from that. There was no symbols or nothing at the time. And so when we started communicating telepathically, I had questions for him. And on my side, it was more about my experiences I had prior to that, which was visions, which created anxiety. And I had panic attacks as well. So I booked an appointment with a clinical hypnotherapist to get rid of the anxiety and the visions. I want to get rid of them altogether and try to get on with my work. At the time, I was in charge of a multinational in the honey industry, and I had a company in Canada, US, in New Zealand, and in the UK. So I was managing a fair bit amount of staff and products, and millions of dollars in tow. So I had to be there. I had to be present. So I had no time for nonsense and for these kind of things. I was, let's say, geared up towards visions when I was a child, but as I grew up, I kind of left that behind because I was more dwelling into the physical world and the reality of our of our planet, with money and stuff. So I wasn't really thinking of anything else. I was not spiritual at all, not like the way I am now. I'm probably not the greatest spiritual person, but I'm a bit better, I would say. So when we communicated, I was asking him about the visions I was having, which were involving cataclysms and earthquakes, tsunamis, like you name it. And he basically responded to me saying, yes, lots of people will die, but what does it matter? Basically, like we could transcend our bodies and that our soul will still survive, therefore, it's not a big deal. So that probably created more anxiety for me, and I was even probably more stressed out afterwards, but at the time I didn't realize it. And when he vanished, it felt like a haze. It disappeared in a haze. And when he completely vanished, and he was standing up right in front of my library, and I could see him very clearly. Like it was like if I could see you exactly like that in a room. It was not an hologram, or it didn't feel like one. It was not a ghostly figure. And when he disappeared, I stood up, and first thing I remember, I still remember that to that day, I looked at my feet, thinking, have I dreamed this? Have I turned mad? And I walked, towards the kitchen to grab my cup of, tea that I prepared earlier, and thinking that only like 15 minutes went by, and I grabbed it and I remember I put it to my lips, still thinking about what just happened, and I just realized that the tea was freezing cold. So I put it down and I said, and I looked at the clock, and that's when I realized that I had over 2 hours of missing time.
Wow.
So the time vanished, and it was odd, but nothing after that occurred like instantly. I would say there was no more visitations from him right away, or there was no visions of him or nothing like that. It stopped until I had more voices like telling me go to Mount Shasta and do this and do that. So I've done a few interviews on that subject. So I won't go back to that kind of event. I think we should try to move forward and talk more about the relevancy of my story with Derrick, because I think the relationship here is very important, and I managed to connect the dots as time went by. So as I was growing up, let's say over the years, like since 2011, I had multiple experiences that led me to where I am today, and he gave me some pieces of information that I could not understand at the time, but now that I heard Derrick's story on YouTube, I basically was able to listen to his interview with you for 2 hours or so, and I was just astonished by the synchronicity and the analogies because of my experiences, which I believe at the time, after looking it up online, that the being that showed up to me was a Pleiadian, because everything that I looked online was either like a Pleiadian or Nordic, but he never introduced himself as such. I only made that conclusion. So I was misled, I would say, with that fact or that point that I could read online. But as I was doing some AmiSync seminars and these sort of things, even having a regular massage, for like 2 hours or an hour and a half, I was able to have visions, or those beings will still show up to me and speak to me and share more information with me. As I was in a relaxed state, and they would share more stuff with me that, again, were cryptid in a way, that there were some words like Ataya. Ataya was the word I heard when I was doing an AmiSync session with Paul Elder in Anunnaki on Vancouver Island. And it was a 5-day seminar, and my star mother, because I just came to realize that Zo was my younger brother in my star family, and we can call him Anunnaki. Nordics. People even say that they are one and the same. But the relationship between my star mother and myself, I saw her afterwards while doing some regressions and so some hypnosis sessions, and I could see her, but she never talked to me. That was the first time she talked to me during the emissing sessions, and she showed me a planet exploding.
Now that's very interesting. So these beings, they were contacting you, and this communication they had was metamorphic and telepathic. Even after the fact of the initial contact, you were still getting downloads. But what I thought was very, very fascinating is, as you mentioned with Derrick, that we had an interview that has been very, very popular. It's had thousands of views out there, and it was an interview with an ET contactee and psychic detective. And your interview, which was documented very well on Project Camelot with Carrie Cassidy, going into your story, if those folks on the other side of the screen want to listen to these parallels. Here are you two guys on two different continents experiencing the same beings that are contacting them. Now, the parallel that you've drawn is that you were contacted and interacting with Zol. Okay, and so this is also connected to the same group of people, which we'll call, as you mentioned, Nordique, Anunnaki. We put them into that category. But with Zael, you were contacted with Derrick. Can you tell those watching how this happened to you? How did the contact begin?
Well, the contact began since I was 8 years old. And then I just realized after that someone just left me a message the other day, and they said that there was well over 1,000 phone calls in Manitoba. Brandon, Manitoba is where I had my first sighting of UFOs of a kid, and I thought it was 8, and then and then they said no, Derrick, it was 1967 that you had experienced the UFO phenomena. And I said, well, how's that? And they said, well, 1967 was the year where they had over 1,000 phone calls. And the cool part is that means I was 11 years old, which makes a whole lot of sense. And at the time, as a kid, we never had TV. But I remember seeing these people. They looked like they were normal to me. I mean, just being a kid. But these people were absolutely tall. I mean, there's 8, 9 feet tall. I mean, their height was way up here. And I thought, well, how can I compare this to my father? Like how tall my father is, but they're much taller than my dad. But they look really normal. But I think the major part of remembering them was when I went through the experience back in 2000, where they come to get me again, and they asked Marina, we're going to take your husband with us. I'm like, do you mind? And we're going to be gone for a couple hours. My wife goes, no problem, go. It's like I thought she was going to come with me, but she didn't know. This is your journey, your adventure. So, but when they appeared to me, they were wearing white uniform. It was all white, and they were wearing headgear, but the headgear looked oval in shape with black slanted eyes, so to speak. But they had no facial features on them. And just a bit of a slight opening, but it was like there was no expression. And I remember watching them take this huge thing off their head, and here they were. They looked like us, blonde hair, blue eyes, nice features. The only cool part was that their eyes weren't exactly normal like us. They're just slightly larger, right? Like they were very bright looking eyes. A bit of a slant in the weight, but they look so human like us. I mean, I said, well, who are you? And he said, don't you remember me? And I said, no. And he says, I'm Zael. He said, we've been visiting you and taking you with us many times through the years. And he actually had a beard. This is the cool part, because he had a beard. He wasn't just a regular person with just just naked face. He had a beard, so he looked like a person who was nomadic. They were like the Viking features, like gruff looking, but he looked very. He was how do you say it? Smart, intelligent, soft spoken, not harsh in your face. Like we're coming with us. It's more like, do you want to come with us? He's asking if I want to come with him. I said, sure. So I went with them, and we went to a small ship. It it was transparent in a way. When you walked in, like you're walking into a transparency of a ship, and then it goes up, and then we went into another ship. And it was much bigger, because when I was on the ship, and I said, well, how did I get up here so quickly? And he says, just like that. And because I wasn't thinking about the time, but I did ask him how many people are living, or how many people are in this ship, and he says, well, we have well over 300,000 people here. So, and apparently the ship was the size of, the way he was trying to make comparison, it was the size of 3 football fields. And if you know football fields, how big they are, 3 football fields, and basically it's quite large. They have the way of cloaking and traveling with the ship. And I never knew what the word cloaking means until later on through the years, and I watched Star Trek and went, oh, that's what it is, cloaking. But remember, they were transparent, and they would actually, the way I remember watching them, it looked like they are part of the clouds, like as if their movement was movement, but you can feel you're part of the cloud going into the sky. And then they shot straight up, and then I said, well, where's the planet? And like, I think we're going to go to this planet. And he says, we're going to go to TM. And I said, oh, okay. And I'm going like, dumb, you know, where's TM? And he said, I'll explain all that to you. Enjoy the trip. So in the meantime, they're taking me around the place, and they're introducing me to people. And I think the main part was they wanted for me to meet this one woman that was there, because she was so excited to see me. And at the same time, I started coughing. I didn't know how to react. My body was acting really weird. And I thought I was going to throw up at first. And I realized after it's something to do with the altitude. But as I'm throwing up, so to speak, there was nothing like a regular throw up. I was like choking, and then something came out of my throat. And it looked like a whole bunch of little fibers and wires and something inside. And I threw something up in my hand. And I felt so embarrassed. And I'm looking around like, okay. And I'm holding on to it. I'm hiding this now. I don't want nobody to see this. So they're still showing me. And so they took me into this place. It's like a lab. And I'm holding on to this thing in my hand. And they're showing me, introducing me to some of the people and some of the things they're doing. And I remember being in this lab where there was 3 people inside this, looked like a big stainless steel vat, you know, like it's a big, huge, round one. And it looked like it was mud in a way. I wasn't sure what it was. But they're sitting back and relaxing as if they're in a spa, you know, you're in a mud spa. But I asked them, you know, what this is for, and they said, these 3 people are from your planet, Earth, and they have a sickness, and they are being cured. So, and he said, they are also part of the contacts just like you. So we're not the only ones. Like, you know, Sebastian and I are not the only people that they're coming to take, but they're also helping them, making sure they're here longer. And I thought, well, this is pretty cool. In the meantime, I'm looking around, still trying to find a garbage can, something how to get rid of what's in my hand. And I finally found this garbage can. It looked like a garbage can, so I just dropped it in there. And I'm walking around with them, and they're showing me stuff. And I was really amazed by it. And I met the lab technician. He looked like Deepak Chopra. I swore to God he was actually him, but he's much taller. And I said, what are you doing here? Like Deepak Chopra, like, what are you doing here? And he goes, I'm not Deepak Chopra. And I says, well, you look just like the guy I know on Earth. And he says, he's my doppelganger. So we all have twins. Like basically we have doppelgangers that they are replicating from the same transaction. So basically they're taking us, and we are, what they explained to me, that we are them. We're part of them. We're part of the history of who they once were. But we are a more passive race. So there was, what I did ask him was there was actually a deal that was made through history, that there's a certain group of people that are going to be passive, and another group of people are going to be, you know, whatever they choose to be. So, and according to them, there's another person who looks just like me somewhere else. It always will be. It's another person looks like you somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Now, I did ask them, how come we're not tall like they are? And they said, because there's a gene that was removed from that area, that the gene was removed from the DNA. And then there was actually a smaller, we grew shorter than their group. And our lifespan is not as long as theirs, because they live for 1,000 years. And that's what makes it so unique.
The interesting thing about that, Derrick, is from what I've been told by Jordan Maxwell, is that in his interactions with Zachariah Sitchin, when he was working with him, Sitchin was telling him that the Anunnaki would appear before him and start to tell him things about his research and about his writing. And that's very much what came out in the genetic tampering of what was going on through us. So what else did you learn from this interaction?
Well, like I said, I was trying to get rid of my implants. Or like I didn't know what it was first, and I threw it out in the garbage. And then this lady came up to me in the room, and she goes, "Derrick, how are you doing? Oh, long time no see." Gave me a big hug. She held onto my hands. She looked at my eyes, and she says, "You don't have a life. You don't have a life. You don't have a future anymore. It's gone. What happened?" And I said, "I don't know. What are you talking about?" And she said, "Did you just get rid of your implants?" I said, "What's an implant?" And she says, "Where is it?" And I said, "I don't know. Did you do something to it?" And I said, "Well, I put something in that thing over there." So she reached in and she says, "Oh, you need an upgrading." So they put me on the gurney, and then they sat down with me and said, "We're going to do this. You're going to have this, implant here and implant here, and then we're going to end up then we want to take you around and meet other people." Now, the important part was, I said, "Well, where are we going now?" And he says, "We're going to go to our planet." So when they took me there, and I said, "Well, how do you get there?" Because I thought maybe, where's Mars, universe, Jupiter? I thought maybe one of those planets. And they said, "No, we're going to go through Orion's belt." So, seeing the 3 stars across the sky? And I said, "Yes, that's what we're going to go through. It's actually the black hole. That's basically you call the black hole. We're going to go through there, and we're in another galaxy." And I said, "Okay, but why are you guys dealing with me?" He says, "We are the guardians. We're the ones that are watching this planet, your planet that you live on. We have to keep an eye on you, making sure that you are sharing what we need you to do to take care of this earth."
It's incredible. Now, with what Derrick's saying there, do you find parallels in your experience?
Huge amount. I mean, when I first watched the interview of Derrick, after we met at the conference in Vancouver, I was astonished by multiple facts. The first one is the week after my contact with Zoe, I went to see the hypnotherapist, and that's when I was regressed, and I was not expecting an abduction per se. And the first thing I saw was my feet leaving the ground, and I was in France at the time. In that abduction, I was leaving the ground, and I was commenting on this without realizing what was going on, because I never believed or I've never thought of being abducted in the first place. So I was describing the experience of being lifted up in the air and then placed on my back, and heading feet first into this small craft that was just hovering over my school. I was in a boarding school in France, and it's just an amazing thing that down the line afterwards, when I spoke to a few of my friends who were also in that school, who reported having not abductions but sightings of UFOs even landing on the ground. One of them is actually working for the Ministry of Defense for France, and he can't talk about this, but he shared that with me in confidence, saying, "Do not mention that to anyone else. Don't mention my name." Well, he said I won't mention his name, so I'm respecting that. But the fact is that 2 or 3 other guys that were with me commented on UFO sightings, or even one landing on the ground there around the same time as I was there. So my abduction there was basically not by Anunnakis or Nordics. They were tall gray aliens, and they were kind of a scary bunch of looking beings with long arms and skeleton looking like fingers, like elongated fingers, and their expressions, I mean, were not like human beings. It was like a small pipe hole and big eyes as well, black eyes. And I couldn't see any ears, but probably like just slits instead of the ears. And they were arguing. While I was laying down, they hooked me up to an IV, and I put a helmet on my head, and I didn't know what was going on. And that's when they started doing this sound, coming out of their small pipe hole of a mouth. And so the hypnotherapist, this happened in 2 sessions. The first time around, when I got abducted and I went to the spacecraft, and I described those beings. She just stopped the session altogether because she was not prepared, and I wasn't prepared either. But I kept going. You know, I was not fazed by the experience, and I was not believing in it. That's the thing. For me, I was thinking that I was having a very vivid imagination, so I was describing it like a nice science fiction movie. But you know, I couldn't really relate to the story because I never had that interest in the first place. So for me, it was, yeah, you know, it's interesting. I can describe what I'm seeing, but I don't really know if it's me or, you know, someone else or whatever. And so when I heard that sound, the hypnotherapist said to me, ask them what they're arguing about. And so I said, well, how can I do that? They don't speak English or French. So he said, yeah, you know, with your subconscious, you will be able to ask the question and they will be able to answer you back. I said, all right, so I'll do that. So I asked the question. I said, so what are you arguing about? And the first thing they said was, we can't touch you because you have been tampered with. So I didn't know what that meant. So then the hypnotherapist said, well, can you ask them what that means? And they couldn't tell me anything. So then they said, well, can they show you what that means? And then they showed me some symbols, like holographic symbols between them and myself. And one of them was an upside down triangle, so the base on top, the point at the bottom, with 3 black dots on each point. And there was a staff and like a 7-star. Again, I couldn't really describe those features or those symbols, but to me, still to this day, I don't know what those symbols mean. But maybe it would come down the line, I don't know. But the upside down triangle was what really shocked me, because when I saw those symbols, I then asked them, well, what do they mean? And they would not tell me anything. So then the hypnotherapy said something that completely changed my views on hypnotherapy and what I was seeing. And she said, can they then show you where you've seen those symbols before, if they mean anything to you? And that's when I basically blacked out under hypnosis. And I went backwards. It felt like I went backwards. I don't know if it was in time or space or whatever. What I feel was the movement of going backwards. And when I opened my eyes, I was in exactly the pods that you described, Derrick, with the black liquid that had like intelligence to them. I don't know if it was artificial intelligence or something else, or people call it black goo. I don't think it was black goo, because for me it was healing me.
Yeah, it looked like mud.
Yeah, it looked like mud, but it was more like an oily texture to me, like very smooth, like silky looking, almost like light could reflect on it. It was so smooth. And I was inside that pod, and I could see these omega symbols on the inside of those pods that were upside down, and they were like the hinges, almost like between the glass that was covering those pods and where I was in. And as the liquid was completely immersing my body, and I was seeing this as a 6-month-old.
Wow.
So I went from when I was abducted in my school at 16 years old, and I just realized that, oh, I'm a 6-month-old now in that pod, and I was not anticipating it. And that's when I realized that the liquid started to move, and it made me cry. And I cried as an adult. I was 35 years old at the time, because my first hypnosis sessions happened a week after my encounter with Zoe. And when that happened, you know, I was brought back, and, you know, that was a very emotional session there. But during that pod session, I could see beings through the glass. And the hypnotherapist said, well, can you come out of your body and to check what's around you? And so because she wasn't specific about it, I just came out of my body, and I described the next scene, which was, oh, I can see this massive spacecraft. And it was cubic in shape, like elongated, like almost like 2 to 3 football fields, same thing. That could probably have at least 300,000 people as well. And I knew exactly where I was inside the spacecraft, and I could see the Earth underneath it.
Incredible.
So it was hovering over the Earth. It was not far away from the Earth. And it was cloaked because, again, they could not be seen from the Earth, you know, through different means. But I could see it.
So you guys have these exact similarities. You have this intelligent, healing mud or liquid, for lack of better terms, that's able to heal you in these pods that are there, they're present. You have about a 2 to 3 football field wide, a long spaceship that you're
Yes.
traveling on, and they're
Yep.
able to cloak and go into these areas. But what really catches my attention, and the similarities between your stories, is that you're talking about Zol.
Yes.
Derrick's talking about Zael.
Yes.
Derrick, can I ask you, can you tell everybody what it was like to meet Zael? What does this great being look like? How tall is he?
He's I figured about 9-10 feet tall, even taller probably. He was quite tall. I mean, when I looked up to the guy, he they let me step up to this on the stand so I could talk to him face to face. He was very tall. I mean, from a distance in the room, like this whole room that we're in the lab, so to speak. I think it was the lab, and he was standing from the far end of the room, so it was easier for me to talk to him this way from a distance. But if I would talk to him, if I was up close, he would have to sit down to talk to me. Because, if I try to look up and he knew I was, it was kind of intimidating to look, like I've met, 7.5 foot tall people before, but this guy was like your neck is way back. So he would sit down to talk to me. And so then we're eye to eye, face to face. So if you ever decided to do some sort of a graph and get an idea of, circumference and see how tall that person would really be compared to me standing, that'll tell you exactly how tall he is. But I'm sure he must be about 9-10 feet.
Yeah, so my experience with that being, he was one of the two beings that didn't have like the multiple of people in the room that you've met. There were only two beings. There was, I say Zael, if it's for better term, if it was him. Mm-hmm. He was a bearded guy. To me, he reminded me of Zeus, like the kind of the statues that you could see from Greece or Rome, exactly the same way. And he had this helmet on, not quite the same as the way you described it, but it was more like a trident symbol on it. And it was, instead of having peaks on top, it was more rounded. So like the three, what do you call it, the arrows, let's say, were more like rounded on the top. And it was not like a full-size helmet that you could still see the wavy hair going through it. Mm-hmm. And he had like bracelets, same as the woman as well. She had chains around her neck as well. And they were both the same height. Now, Zoe, when he came to see me in my house, was about 6'2", 6'3". He was the shortest out of the three. I mean, so the Zael and the woman were the same height, and they were about probably 8 to 9 feet tall. Hard to describe as well. I don't have much, knowledge on height myself, but he was pretty tall for what I've seen. And they were actually on a platform, so they were actually above me in a spacecraft.
That's absolutely incredible. Now I have a question for the both of you. When we look at places like the Vatican, and at the Vatican, if you go up to St. Peter's Basilica, there's a statue there, St. Peter, that everybody has kissed the feet off of at the Vatican. Now, in the Catholic Encyclopedia, they admit out there that that's actually a statue of Zeus. And Sebastian was just saying that, this being, Zael, looks very much like Zeus. He has the attributes of a godlike figure. Mm-hmm. Based on what you were told, Derrick, based on your interactions, did they indicate to you at any time that they have been interacting with humanity throughout history, these beings, and could they have been mistaken as these great gods of our mythologies?
What I learned from them, they said that the Romans, if you look at the centaurs, and you look at the, they were doing a lot of experimentations, and they were part of Atlantis at one time, and Lemuria. They were involved in that as well. They were helping to work with the Lemurians, and the people that were part of Atlantis were, the Greys were helping the Atlanteans, and they were messing with the crystals, and they were trying to create, what they said, it was, they're trying to create a war between the both different tribes, I guess we call it tribes, or say crew, people. But the main part was, what I'm trying to point out is, they, I'm in a, how to explain this part? They look more like, the Romans are trying to make them look like mythological gods. Well, they weren't mythological. The word myth means, that it's not real. They were real. And so they used to experiment making, you know, half human people by turning them into mermaids.
Chimeras.
Half human, half fish. Half goat, half man, half horse, half human. I mean, they were doing experimentations. They knew how to do it, and they're trying to find ways to, I guess, see if that would actually work. This is where the Atlanteans were messing with, and the Romans were using that idea later on through the years that they were a myth, and they weren't. They were real. But down the road, later on down the road, many of those people that were considered myths were actually removed, destroyed. Except some did not leave this world as in death. They were actually taken on the ships and brought to another planet.
Fascinating.
Because I met a centurion in a battle with a gray.
Now, Sebastian, were you told of any sorts of interactions they've had with humanity throughout our history?
Yes, they certainly have. When I had interactions with Zael, especially when I first saw him on the spaceship, only through hypnosis, he was unhappy to see me. You know, so when I came by to see him, he was like, "You are not supposed to remember who you are," and he was not happy about this. He said, "But now that you know, we will be sharing more information with you, basically." And Zoe was the one to be blamed for this because he's the one who came to see me, and I think he didn't respect protocol in that sense. So that's what happened. I mean, he came to see me, and I saw him, and I guess a lot of things kind of opened up for me in many ways, but I didn't know that at the time. So when he spoke to me, he said that humanity was manipulated over time, and that we were the fifth manipulation on Earth and the last. That's what his words were, which is interesting because I spoke to a few biologists and other people and anthropologists about this, and they kind of also concurred with what I said to them about the fifth manipulation of mankind, and they kind of said, yeah, you know, there is an evolution process with humanity, and it kind of makes sense. But on his views, it was more about like the Atlanteans and Lemurians. I think they were still in charge of making the civilizations on the planet.
Did they mention Atlanteans and Lemurians to you, directly?
Lemurians they have, not so much Atlantis, but Lemuria, yes. I had a direct intervention with Lemuria because I'm the one who pushed the button to make Lemuria explode or disappear. But the beings that were there, and I stayed on Lemuria through a session that was kind of surreal. It was not an hypnosis session. It was more of it was a quantum touch healing experience. I don't know if you are familiar with that term or that technique when you do quantum touch healing.
I'm familiar with the quantum hypnosis, like
Yes.
Garnet Schulhauser does, but this
Right.
is different.
No,
This is
that's
quantum
different.
touch.
It's just quantum touch. So the person is sitting on the corner and does, you know, healing energy on your body with your chakras and everything else. And I picked up on this while I was laying down, and it was quite surreal. Again, I was not anticipating this. I was just going to be, you know, ready to relax and have fun. But the fact is that I could see all of my chakras being worked on, and then again I blacked out almost, and I could see myself walking through the gates of Lemuria, and I could see those beings greeting me. There were a bunch of people there that looked like humanoids, the human-like beings, and I was greeted as a guest, but I was in an Anunnaki form, right? So again, I would like to backtrack from my experience on the ship, because when Zoe spoke to me and showed me a body on a slab sleeping, or like in a coma almost or something, saying, you know, this is you, you know, but you are just like an avatar on Earth living that experience, and it's like one out of many. So my incarnation on Earth is just one out of many. So the Anunnaki have the experience and the knowledge of splitting the soul, so they can have various experiences in the cosmos, and Earth is just one of them.
So this is just exactly like what Derrick had told us about the doppelgangers, and when he had seen a Deepak Chopra lookalike up there that this goes on. Now, my question for the both of you then would be, is this doppelganger program limited to the Anunnaki as they come down here, or is this going on for everybody on Earth in different extraterrestrial civilizations?
It's going everywhere. I mean, even in any race, you can. I mean, I've had people that come up to me and they say, "Oh, you look like my uncle. You look like my father, or my brother," and I'm talking about being on the reserves. You know, like just visiting families, and they'll say, "You look like my cousins," and I mean, in my tone of my skin, I didn't expect to, but they said they look in your eyes and they know. You know, there's a connection that's through the eyes. You know, people say, you know, you see the history in your eyes.
Yes.
And it's true. We have a lot of history through our eyes. And when I was traveling, when I actually was on the planet with them, they were showing me things that history of their planet, what it looked like. The interesting part was, I remember when I said, well, how is your oceans doing? Like, you know, do we have water here? And they said, yes, we have a system that we've created water. We don't have the conditions of real water, but they had a type of lake that you can dive into it, but you'll never sink in it. And it looked like mercury. And you can swim in it, but you can't see through it. You know, it's kind of interesting. So they said, but it has a healing capacity in it as well. If you need to use it, you go in it. So I said, well, do you want to try it? And I just jumped in there. And it was kind of strange because you can see part of when I was laying on my back, so to speak, and it's as if you're actually in another part of the world. Is that there's this place that you can jump into salt water and you'll never sink. Well, I had that. I'm just visualize it being mercury, but your hand sticks out and you go like, well, that's weird. You know, I'm inside of this, I can go under it, and it was really quite the experience. It was really weird. But there was I did see any animals there. Not one animal. And I asked them, are there any animals here? And they said, they've all been destroyed. They were all destroyed. Not by, like they didn't say, well, like, you know, what happened? There was a great war and all the animals perished.
So I've seen that on the planet itself. So I was looking at the Anunnaki being at war with another race, and I could see those crafts, like individual crafts, where those ETs were inside it. And I would say it's almost like a V shape, and then there were like three. It's like this is the design of what I remember seeing, and you could see the cockpit, you know, and you could see a being inside of it. And the being inside of it was more of a reptilian type of looking like inside. And they were just like shooting lasers at the buildings and the people and, you know, on that planet. And when I saw this is what my star mother showed me when I was doing the emissing session. And so she showed me this as a movie. Like, this is, you know, what happened. And I could see like the different types of buildings. One of them looked like it had like an orange ball of energy inside it. And it's hard to describe how it was like. It was a big tower, and I can't even describe. It was so intricate. The buildings were so intricate, but all I could see were those flying objects and then shooting lasers at the buildings and people, and fires going on and all of that. So it was a big catastrophe. And then down the line, the planet exploded, and I was looking at the planet exploding from a spacecraft, the spacecraft that we already described, where the people had to leave the planet, basically. And so at the time, during that invasion or war, there was no animals around. I could honestly see beings like running for their lives, and but it looks like they were taken by surprise, and it was a war going on. But I didn't see anything else. But the fact is that my star mother shared that name Ataya, which means gift in Arabic, and that was before I even knew Derrick.
Now let me ask you this, because that was actually the next question I was going to ask the both of you. You mentioned Atalia, you mentioned a gift. Both of you are very gifted, and we know, Derrick, you've been doing this for over 30 years. You've been working as a renowned psychic medium, doing all kinds of work with remote viewing and investigations. And Sebastian, your work as a remote viewer is absolutely profound. I've seen you at work. I've seen you out locating things and what you've seen. And I know that there's a lot of this coming up in your book, talking about this. Were you guys gifted your abilities after being extraterrestrial contactees?
I guess it's in a way you don't, like, as a kid growing up, there was no such word. The word psychic ever existed. I mean, the word never existed at all. Because those years, everyone would call it the word occult, occult. Anything to do with books, you call them occult books, and people try to, keep you from actually reading those books for fear of, they're going to go to the devil, that sort of thing, and yet I was always curious, but yet as a kid growing up, I grew up in a haunted house in Manitoba. So I mean, Manitoba is actually one of the most haunted provinces in Canada, because of its history back in the settlement started back in the 1600s. So being in a haunted home, I grew up with seeing people transparent, and to me they look like they're real, and I would talk to them, and then I'd be called a crazy kid. But that's normal for me, whether I'm here, like if I could be talking to the camera right here, I would say, okay, I'm having a normal conversation with the camera. And because that camera's talking back to me, but the kid on the side would say, who are you talking to? That person there. And they're going like, there's no one there. And then they're going like, he's a crazy kid. So that's why I lost a lot of friends. I thought I had friends, but I started to, there was no teachers to teach me to deal with this. So I had to do this on my own. And my mother was very good to keep me sane, so to speak, because she said that she knew I was gifted, because my mother had insight, and I strongly felt that my mother was also taken at one time, by them, but she wouldn't admit it. And she says, well, I don't want to talk about that. And my grandmother, they were both gifted people. They believed in getting readings from readers. They were mostly teacup readers, because most of those years back then, everyone went to a teacup reader. And my mother was, she even had a prediction made by the teacup reader telling her who she's going to marry, the man's initials, first and last, when it was going to happen. And my mother wanted to believe it, but didn't believe it. But in the end, it all happened the way it came true. But she didn't know. And the person that gave her the teacup reading said to her, when your son is born, he's going to be one just like me. She says, and some. And my mom goes like, yeah, right, sure, my son can, So, but when I was born with white hair. And it's according to the monks, Buddhist monks, if you have any inkling of white hair as a person, just growing into this world, that's important to them, because you're considered as a sacred being. And I didn't know that, but later on through the years, my hair started to change from white to darker blonde hair. But the interesting part was, as I'm growing up, through the years, I started seeing things more than most average people, and I would start seeing beings that looked different, but to me, that was normal, right? And I'm sure Sebastian would go through the same thing. You look at these people and you think, okay, you see them, you think it's normal. I had to, I didn't turn to any teachers really until a guy seeked me out and said to me, you need help because you've been asking them up there for help, and so I'm here to help you. How did you know? Like, I'm just asking him, how did you know? And he says, because my director sent me. Who are your directors? Them. So he came to see me. So he was brought to see me. I was sent down to see me. And he trained me for about, on the average of 6 months in my skills. And then he says, now I'm going to leave you. And he did. So I'm on my own to learn. But that's your proper teacher, not somebody that's going to be, saying, proclaiming, I'm a psychic, I'm going to train you. And that's not what they're looking for. They wanted someone who actually has a skill, but they come to you with humbleness and, not this ego. And that's something that we had to learn. I had to learn to be humble with my skills and my gift, because they're showing me, as a child growing up, this is what you're going to be able to deal with. And you'll learn to deal with humility, but you'll also learn how to deal with strength, inner strength, and also become a healer.
So it sounds like to me, Derrick, it was a bit of both. You were both realities. You were born with these abilities, but you were also instructed in your interactions with the star family,
Yeah.
these enhanced the abilities and they honed in on it. One thing I want to add in is that the year you mentioned, 67, out there in Winnipeg, there was a very famous case that happened in Canadian ufology. Of course, we know about the Stephen Mishlak case at Falcon Lake, where there was a very famous UFO sighting. The same year we look over at the Shag Harbor incident over in Nova Scotia. Sebastian, I got to ask you the same question. Were your abilities as a remote viewer, did they exist before your contact experiences? Did you inherit any of them from your family?
Yes, so it's very, again, interesting with the parallels. My mother is also very intuitive. She had a near-death experience at the age of 16 years old in a car crash. And she came back from that with the ability to heal people. To remove the burns like from people's bodies when they get physically burned. So I mean my life is kind of unusual, but the let's say the deja vus type of scenarios were very frequent. Seeing ghosts, having like seeing those silhouettes moving around, and I used to see a lot of those things growing up, and I was never frightened by any of this. So that's the interesting part. My mother always believed that, I was not from here, but that's a different story.
I think most of us believe that about you.
But she told me that one day she was doing some Reiki, because she's into Reiki, and she turned to Buddhism after a near-death experience as well. And when she did a Reiki session, she saw the Anunnaki beings in the room. And she said to me, and you were amongst them. That's what she said to me. After I talked to her about my hypnosis sessions, she would not talk to me about that before, right? So that was the interesting parallels, and they were wearing the blue uniforms.
Incredible. Is it possible then, and this is going back to a question I asked you earlier, and I asked Derrick the same question, going back to what we talked about, the doppelganger phenomena with Deepak Chopra being split, and there being a split of you guys here. Is it possible that A, you either had a past lifer as an Anunnaki, or is there an aspect of the science of consciousness that we don't understand yet on how they're splitting the consciousness and allowing you to be born as a human here through a consciousness transference, and so that you are staying asleep in that pod there, and then you're having the life where you're pushing the button on Lemuria, or you're coming here. Is that more the case, more of the latter, rather than the past life?
Yes, that's what it was like to me. When I saw myself on a slab, I was not dead, and I was not in a coma all the time. I was definitely like sleeping in that state at that point in time. But when my mother saw me, I was, according to her, I was wide awake and standing up amongst other beings. So when I grew up, I had these visions, and again, random visions. But when I turned 16, when I was abducted without knowing it, which was the reason why the hypnotherapists brought me back to that time in the first place, in my school, it's because I had experiences of bilocation, where I was seen by my close friends at two different places at once. And I was not aware of it. So that was one of the things. I was also doing automatic writing of an ancient language, going from top to bottom and from left to right. So I was basically doing this, different symbols that had patterns to them. And I used to fill pages and pages of that without knowing what they meant.
Sounds like hieroglyphics. They can go in any direction.
It was more like almost like Chinese type of writing, but he had like lines, very like wavy lines with dots and lines, and again, like it was repeated. It was pretty much in line like this, like Chinese, and I could not say what it was, but I was so drawn into this that I was drawing those symbols for like 2 hours straight. In my art classes, for example, or something. And I even used one of the symbols in one of my art pieces I did. So I had that, and I also had very vivid visions of people's futures. So one of the girls that was in my class during a Spanish class, I could see her having an accident on a scooter leaving the school. And she was being persecuted, like hit by a car on the right-hand side. And I could describe the car and everything else. And so at the time, I didn't know what to do with this. So I wrote it down on a piece of paper and I put it into her pen case during the break. When she read it, she said, "Oh, who did this?" Like a prank. But when I said it was me, she was mad at me for a while, and then, it was all forgotten. A year later, she had the accident, exactly the way I described it. I saw her as being dead in that, visions. She didn't die, but she became paraplegic. And the man who hit her in the car was the Spanish teacher that we were having the class in when I had the vision that day.
Incredible.
So I couldn't say that in advance, but that's what happened. So after that event, that's when the first time when I was looked at as a weirdo kind of thing, even if I wasn't a weirdo, I was still doing sports and everything else. I had friends, but those girls gave me that look that made me very uncomfortable, that I was looked at differently by them at that point. And it didn't last very long, and then I moved anyway, and I went to the Dordogne, which is where my mother lived. My parents divorced when I was 7 years old, and at the time I was living with my dad, and then when I decided to go to England without my dad's authorization, I was not allowed to go back in his house, so I went with my mom to finish my studies. And so that's basically what happened. When I met my wife, my future wife at the time, obviously, she was frightened by those visions. And when I was sharing things that I could comfortably work with, she wasn't happy with it, because she thought, well, what happens if you see me dead, or if you see us split up, or if it's any kind of things? Her insecurities made me shut it off for 10 years.
Wow.
And so I created this kind of cage around me, like closing all around me. I could still see holes, through it, but that kind of gave me the ability to shut visions and everything coming to me, until they came back in full force when my daughter, when my wife became pregnant with our daughter at the time in 2010. So all of that just happened chronologically.
So you created a psychological Faraday cage to sort of block all this out. Now it's very interesting, because there's a parallel to what you said. Well, many parallels, of course, to what you and Derrick said. You were mentioning that you were treated as an outcast after you had dropped that note into the pencil box that had the scene that you had witnessed when you were viewing it in your vision about the scooter. Well, Derrick, you said the same thing. But I have to ask you, Derrick, Sebastian was mentioning when his wife first discovered what was happening to him, this was very unsettling, very shocking for her. How did your wife take it?
Well, basically, my wife heard me herself, and she saw what I went through. And years later, I decided she wanted to do a past life regression. So I took her back in time, and she saw herself in the Mayan time period, that she actually was on the top of the flat top pyramids herself, and she was wearing the original outfit as a healer. She was a woman, and her job was to welcome the sun, and she wore the feathers and she wore the gold, and that was her job. So I asked her how old she was, and she said, I'm very young. And I said, how long did you live till? And she says that she lived for 1,000 years, 6 lifetimes. And she said that the interesting part was that the Anunnaki, and she never used their names that way, but she says she remembers them coming in and watching what she was doing. And the thing is that I strongly feel that she had that connection with them long before I came into the picture. Because I asked her if I was any way of being a partner of hers that lifetime, and she says, no, you were down below, you're one of the villagers. So
wives, they're always so funny.
Just a villager, Did I have anything romantic interesting? No, you're just a villager. But the thing is that just that word, she lived for 1,000 years, 6 lifetimes for 1,000 years. That's 6,000 lifetimes, or 6,000 years.
That's incredible.
But her partner, who she had with her, was a Black Panther. Her Black Panther was her protector, but it was also by her side. So this happened during the Mesopotamia time period. And when she found this book in the bookstore that actually relates to all the flat top pyramids, and when she opened that book, she was crying. She literally lost it. And it took her back, and her cell memory what happened to her, because she was telling me everything that went on. As soon as she saw that picture, it's like she's never seen the picture before, but when she saw that picture, that very same, that just at that moment, she just lost it. She started crying and talking about how strongly connected she was with it, and you know, she wished that she was back there again. Just that feeling that you were so important to help to be there with the people. And so at that time, the Anunnaki were there. They were helping in that time period with the Mayan, because that's where a lot of their landing sites and their ships were actually landing, and they were helping people help to recreate humankind.
That's incredible. Did you experience something similar?
I did, but not in the Mayan times. For me, when I went to the hypnotherapist in 2011, she wanted me to explore my past lives first, and because I also had chronic pains on my back, and I always felt that pain, and for no reason. It was like scar tissue, like a scar tissue on my back. And so I went back to the time where I was in Egypt, and it was, I think we already talked about this before, where you have those flat pyramids as well, like in Mayan times, but they were in Egypt.
Like
and
a ziggurat sort of thing?
Yeah, exactly. And the I could see myself as like a geneticist. So I was outside on the sand, and there was those tall beings on my right-hand sides. Now those tall beings were the same creatures you have in the hieroglyphs, where they have human bodies, very tall, but with like falcon heads or different types of animal heads. And I remember seeing the people around, that they were not happy with it. So they were not revering them as gods, even if those beings treated me like their father, you know, because I created them along with other scientists. But I've seen the lab, like I was underneath those pyramids where the labs were, and it was before the Gizeh pyramids and, you know, all these pyramids were created. And I remember a time where I got killed. I was stabbed in the back during a procession underneath, like, I don't know, there was like a river or something, or like a channel of water in the middle, and there were a procession of people on each side in white, you know, robes and uniforms, and I was laying, like, wearing this leopard skin type, but we were all walking, and all of a sudden I felt this stab on my back, which is where I've got my scar tissue. And the reason why all of the scientists got killed, for again the impression I got and the knowing of that experience, is that we got killed because we created abominations. So those beings were also killed and buried, you know. And it's funny because recently I discovered, and you may know this, that they found some animal parts in some tombs in Egypt, along with some human bodies. So they were not just like pets, but there was some kind of weird bones that they could not describe what they were, and, you know.
Do you think that was connected?
Maybe.
Absolutely,
I don't know.
fascinating.
As I was outside with those beings on that sand in a remote location, I could see this triangular shape UFO above us, above the pyramids, that was casting this shadow on the sand. It was a hot day, but you can imagine like a long shadow cast on all of us, and that's what made me look up. That was the shadow.
Now, I was mentioning to you before, and I was just going to throw this in there. Is this the area that I told you when you were describing this to me, and I was showing you over by Saqqara and the Red Pyramid, which people can go look up? Did it look similar to that?
The building looked exactly the same.
Incredible.
I can't tell about the location, or because I think probably the sand dunes and everything else would have moved over time.
Yes.
But the building looked exactly the same at the time.
It's incredible because in that particular area, and when we look over at Abu Sir and those sorts of areas, I've heard people describe an extraterrestrial connection there to what they feel, and they see there's a serious connection. And I want to ask you a question, Derrick, that connects over to both of you and your lives and the split of souls and how you're connected there. When you were on the ship, they gave you a very special and important crystal. Could you tell us about that?
Oh, this one here. This is a key. When they gave this to me, actually what they had done, they had this actually was in a panel. and they were doing recordings of my history, of my health, everything. And they had a flat, like before flat screen TVs ever existed. They already had flat screen TVs. I mean, they were big ones, and they were just doing this, like just pointing and waving, the same way as you see on TV now these days. And I strongly feel that a lot of that what people are doing today, and I was realizing it through the years, that as often as humankind wanted to learn from other extraterrestrials, they're giving them those gifts to learn how to use computers and flat screen TVs and all electronics, because there's no way humankind could ever developed any of this at all unless there's some influence from outside worlds. And I'm not talking about foreign countries. I'm talking about up there. Yeah.
Yes, up there.
So basically, they're saying, you know, we're gonna give. So other beings said, here's the deal. We'll give you, if you give us 1 million victims, so to speak, you know, we'll give you technology, and that's what they follow through. But with the Anunnaki, it's different. And the reason why this crystal has a purpose, because I mean, it's ribbed. And it's specially made for me, and there's a few others that have this as well, but those that are on the ship. But you can see the way it's made, and other people have actually held on to it, and they said they feel such a heavy charge. They've never felt it before, experienced before. But you can see from end to end who's there. But when you put it in the panel and you just slightly turn it, it comes up on the screen, tells you all about me, like anything, my past, the present, and what can happen in the future. And I didn't want to know what happens in the future, not too much of it, because if I did, then I would never, I mean, what they actually asked me to do is to start talking about, you know, what's going to happen, the coming events, some catastrophes that need to change. You know, like if you don't want anything bad to happen, our job is to be responsible to take care of the earth, and to talk about what we need to see and start working with each other, and, you know, as more like a family unit than more like separating. So when I brought that, you know, I was bringing wisdom out in the open back in 2002, 2003, telling people this is what needs to be talked about. A lot of people thinking, yeah, right, yeah, no big deal, and they walk away. So, but Zial told me, and so did this other young lady that I worked with, the one that I dealt with my implants, and she said to me that sometimes it's going to be hard for about rejection. Some people are going to reject you, and they're going to say you're crazy, you're nuts. But they said those people that say you're crazy and nuts are going to be the ones that be experiencing their visit to them down the road. But there are people that are going to be trying to be negative, trying to stop us from telling our story, and there's good people out there that will be supporting it. If you go through a life experience as an abductee or a volunteer, I don't think I'm seeing myself as an abductee. I start realizing it after. I'm more of a contactee, because people used to say you're an abductee. I'm more of a contactee, or even a volunteer. I love being on that ship. I would go again. I really would, because I didn't feel I was done being there and what I had seen, and more things are coming to the surface. And mind you, when Sebastian's saying about, you know, you're not supposed to remember, and yet they let me remember, but they let me remember what I need to remember. They wanted me to remember, and I think his son is a little different. I think they weren't sure if Sebastian was going to be able to share it in a proper manner. I think that Zial's son was kind of worried, thinking that he may not have been able to, not Zial's son, but Zial himself, he was kind of worried, thinking that maybe Sebastian couldn't do the job, you know, like, because Sebastian was focusing on a specific business in his life, you know, and then he realized after, you know, this person's not so bad, so he's giving him an opportunity to really tell the story. Because apparently what I was told, there was not as many of us from working with the Anunnaki that are around to share what's going on. There are a few, and there are other beings that are sharing stories and telling them what they, what they should share. There's some that are transparent, that are beings. Some are actually other dimensionals. But Ziel wanted to make sure that, right now today I strongly feel that you've got support from the other side, and Ziel is giving you that chance.
So I would like to add on to what you just said, and I think I agree with you on that. It's interesting that chronologically speaking, when this happened to me, Zo was more than happy to see me. I think it was more about him, that he wanted to reconnect with me at the time without Ziel knowing. And so when he showed up and then brought me on the ship and then say, here's the family, say hooray. He basically, Ziel not being happy to see me, was my role as a human being was to just live a human experience, like most of us, without remembering who we are, because it kind of stops them learning from us. All they care about is the emotions as well and how we evolve. They can learn from that because, for what I remember, especially from Zo's point of view, and you mentioned that before as well, for saying that they are kind of stone-faced. They don't have much expression. And that's exactly the way Ziel looked like to me, and my star mother as well. They didn't have much human expressions per se. While Zo, the expression that he had, especially like the big bright smile that he gave me, was overly done because it was made up, right? So you learn from the human expression. So, just try to accentuate it and make it like 3 times bigger than your human smile. You could do like.
You're watching too many Hollywood movies.
You could make a commercial for like a toothpaste company. But you see
it's out of this world.
But you're right. Chronologically speaking, when my experience happened in 2011, I was fully immersed in the business role. I didn't have time for any of this. In fact, I pushed it away as soon as it happened to me. I could not conceive working with this. So I don't have time for this, rubbish. Let's move on. And soon enough, unfortunately, in a way, my wife became sick, and she was a partner in the business too. And my priorities changed a lot, drastically. So I was forced to make some changes in the business structure that I was in, and I put the business for sale in 2013. And by 2014, we sold the business and I retained some equity in the new structure. But that gave me way more free time to focus on this kind of work. Yes. And researching this realm and trying to understand quantum physics and trying to at least get a grasp of what's going on in this reality and so on. So when I said earlier at the beginning that I became a bit more spiritual, is because of my experiences now and knowledge of what's out there. That kind of broadened my horizons greatly, and also embracing the experiences I gained from those encounters with those beings. So like, for example, we talk about the Kundalini energy, and I have used the Kundalini energy for various things. Like I could use it for protection. I could use it to counter like psychic attacks, for example. I could attack people with it. This is also known in remote viewing. It's not quite accepted, it's quite frowned upon, but when it concerns ETs attacking you and you basically fight for your life, you want to use it. But that's one of the things that you can use, and you can also use it for basically exploring the universe, doing out-of-body experiences and all sorts of things. I mean, I'm using it as well for remote viewing personally. Like I could be transporting myself in other locations and see things like a movie. Like I don't have to, like do drawings like control remote viewing does. Like, I don't just get impressions. I get impressions and I visualize situations sometimes through the eyes of people, sometimes as myself, depending on where I am and what it's like.
I think that's incredible. And that really is the greatest secret to all the mysteries. I believe when we look around the world, we see that the serpentine energy, or looking at the spine as the representation of the serpent at the body, moving up the 33 vertebrae and tapping into that energy, it's been there the whole time. We're looking at it through Egypt. We're looking at it through the Maya. We're looking at it through Peru, all these places. And it's incredible that you learned how to tap into that and access that energy. But I have to ask you both, when we look at the idea of the Anunnaki, or the sons of Anak, those who from heaven came, You know, some people have believed that they have some sort of a evil or pernicious agenda, that they were manipulating humanity or they were helping humanity. People have different views, and we also get a different idea about their history through Zachariah Sitchin and these ancient writings. And others, even such as Michael Tellinger, have looked at the idea of Adam's calendar and all these places with the Anunnaki originating out of Africa. What do you have to say about that, Derrick?
Tellinger actually interviewed me. He was actually on another program. He was interviewed by Coast to Coast a few years back, and they were asking if anybody wanted to call in and talk about Anunnaki, and I thought, you know what the heck, I'm going to do it. So I called in, and when Nori heard my name, and I told him I'm actually an abductee with the Anunnaki, and that's when Tellinger was actually being interviewed, they didn't even want to talk to me.
Because you were a contactee.
Contactee. And automatically now, normally I'm surprised they didn't just pass me on to Tellinger and say, okay, well, I want to ask him a question or say something to him. They wouldn't. They totally ignored me. And they said, well, you're going to have to call Tellinger himself. They said, this won't work. And so they hung up on me. So I thought, okay, fine, I'll just look up Tellinger. So when I looked up Tellinger and I had a chat, contacted him, and I told him, I said, you know, I'm an abductee. I have worked with the Anunnaki, and I've met them, and I've been on the planet. And he became excited. He interviewed me, wanted to know what I can, you know, he wanted to find out what I had of my knowledge. I'm not sure if he was actually quite impressed with what I know, because he was looking for something that was through his research on location of the land, you know, with footprints and symbolisms and history. That's different, you know, because he's looking for the history of it. I'm telling him what happened on the planet. If he decided to use any of that information is up to him, but I wasn't trying to prove to him who I was. I was just telling him, here's what they look like. And I can describe to him and tell him what they did do. I felt that he wasn't interested in wanting to know what happened up there. He wanted to know what happened where he was in Africa.
Very geocentric.
Geocentric. He was focusing on that only. And so, and again, I'm not gonna say whether it's about him himself. And the thing is that most people, when they do the research about any historical beings from whether it's Earth or space, whether it's through Sitchin or anyone else, the thing is that all their research is what they find on documents and other historical sites, locations. That's fine. But why is Sebastian and I are taken on this ship and still telling the story? Mm-hmm. Now, as far as I'm concerned, they don't want to meet us too. They want to meet them up there. And I thought, okay, here's an opportunity. You want to meet them? Let's call them.
Well, you guys are like the ambassadors. You know, you're on Earth, you're telling these stories, you're helping people to understand. Sebastian, I have a question for you about what you learned from the Anunnaki or these the extraterrestrial councils that were there. Mm-hmm. Did they tell you at all about what was going to happen for the future of humanity? What we can look forward to, or should we be weary?
Yeah, I think for what it sounded like, it was more like it's up to us. I think Derrick will agree with that too, because the idea is that we are empowered. And the way he said to me, when Zael spoke to me directly, he said, you are already given all the gifts that you need to evolve. You don't need us anymore. You can basically do it by yourself. You already have all the tools in your body, in your brain, and your DNA to make all the changes that needs to be done. So if we don't do those changes, well, you know, basically just very dumb. And we just, well, we want to self-destruct ourselves, and that's what we're doing. So by changing the course of history, what does it take? You know, would it be a disaster like the way I've seen things in terms of natural disasters? Could it be in the hands of some groups of Illuminati groups, New World Order, people who wish to simply kill, you know, some people on the planet to reduce the size of the population? You know, who knows? What I'm saying is the only mission, let's say, that the Anunnaki told me was we now, with the knowledge you have, go back on Earth and try to awaken the star seeds of this planet. Okay, where's the manual? So this again, when that happened to me at the time, I thought, you know what, this is rubbish. So just put it on the side and I just ignore it because I didn't know what to do with it, right? And then step by step, they kind of guided me through these steps for having more experiences, remembering who I was, and trying to empower myself with those tools so I can help others. And I can, through these interviews and encounters, I can help people. And I have. I've done a lot of things. But in many ways, some people even listening and viewing those interviews will have a kind of a click. You know, something will happen to them. And it doesn't mean that I'm responsible, but something, a tone, it could be a word, like a buzzwords or something, that without sounding like an MK Ultra agent or anything else, like a psyop. But you know, something will happen within them because we're all connected one way or the other, and something will happen to them as well. You know, yes. Because it's all happening roughly around the same time. We're all on this planet at this time because of that same purpose. We're all part of this at this point in time. So we all understand what's going on, and I think we're all going to be opening up to this as time goes by. So my experience with this is, are we supposed to be living and die? Well, most likely yes. I mean, that's what humans are like. Are we be evolving to something else down the line? I definitely believe so. I think that we're going to be transcending the soul experience, or at least disconnecting our soul from our physical body so we can choose the kind of body or vehicle that we want to use down the line. So if we wish to look like something else, we don't have to look like human beings. As soon as we understand how the atoms and molecules work, and we can dissociate those, or we dissociate from those and create the mass that we want, that kind of matches what the rainbow prophecies talk about. You know, all the First Nations around the planet, like the Hopi Indians, and I think you may know about this too. All they see is like all different races join around a circle, and the trees will grow overnight. So what does it mean in physically? That means that as we understand how reality works, we can make those changes overnight. We can have a direct impact on matter with our mind.
That's absolutely incredible. And well said. Derrick, how do you see the future, and what did they show you as far as where we're headed?
Well, when they showed me on the screen what was going to happen, they showed me catastrophes, and I'm talking about wars, one particular one. And now this is back in 2000 when they showed it to me, and it was rather dangerous because they were going to be using nuclear materials. So they basically said to let others know that they need to awaken. And there's a time, they said there'll be a time between the year 2000 and 2018 that the children will awaken. And they call, some people call them the golden children, some people call them the crystal kids, the crystal children. There's always a different name they give the kids. And there's a generation, and they're going to be awakening, and they're going to be helping awakening the other young ones as well. Which we have today. There's more children now, even though we have cell phones put into our hands, and the people say, well, you know, if you keep looking down this all the time, you're not going to see what's around your surroundings. But yet, in one point, social media actually is helping to awaken all of those that are going on, and everyone right now today is protesting, trying to basically saying, this is not right what you people are trying to do all across the world by controlling us, or trying to control us. And so they're fighting back. And a lot of them are doing different ways, either whether it's protest or whether it's speaking up for, you know, groups of people, and those things do happen. That's basically what's happening. All the young ones are actually awakening, and so that's what I had shared. I told everybody, be aware of what's going on in your surroundings, because our job is still to be caretakers of the earth and to take care of it. Because if we allow nuclear bombs to be made anywhere across the world, and if they are released, then we're doing damage to the rest of the universe. And that's why the Anunnaki specifically came to us, to Sebastian and myself and others, saying that let others know that it's not good to have nuclear bombs, because if you do, that it destroys the rest of the galaxy, destroys the rest of the planetary system, destroys anything and everything around this plane, because our Earth is the youngest planet in the galaxy. And we are, like sometimes people say we're the experimental beings. They're trying to perfect humankind to make it better than what it was before. And so that's why they're trying to even to help us grow older. And I'm noticing now there's more people today are getting older into the age of 100. That's why our politicians, our prime ministers or presidents are getting angry, because now they got to pay, keep on paying us more money for, say, old age pension, because we're hitting that old age. Why are they, you know, now they want to raise the age, saying, well, you can't get a pension until you hit 70 now. We are starting to think of healthy, taking care of ourselves again. We're not depending on the industry of medical. We're basically starting to learn how to regrow. But yet there's always going to be another industry that's going to try and stop us by having to say, we're going to control the seeds. We're going to stop you from having water. You have to buy this. You got to buy that. We have to filtration this and that. We have got to do this and got to do this. We're going to control you. But yet they're going to say it's a law that we can do what we want. And yet society is saying we're going to fight back. We say no. The Anunnaki is saying follow your heart and your dream, and then you will always be protected and guided, because they are the guardians of our planet, and they're making sure that we go to that 5th generation and to that 5th, and we're going to go into a 6th, and that we will live longer. But you will lose some lives, but we are going to be better.
So my experience to do with the warnings about potential disasters from the Anunnaki is that the natural disasters may occur as a possibility. In terms of nuclear weapons, however, I don't believe that that's going to be an actual possibility. Over time, I'm aware that I think it was in Africa, where in Zimbabwe, when they had these visions of nuclear holocausts and these sort of things going on for them. I think there's a lot of fear mongering within that as well, trying to scare you to death, thinking, you know, this is what you could face if you don't change your habits on the planet. So what I understand again from my interactions with those beings is that they already know that there won't be any other those kind of holocausts, because the nuclear weapons or nuclear energy completely disintegrate the soul. Not many people know about this, but it's basically a way to completely destroy the energy or the essence of the energy that we use as what we consider as being a soul or soul energy. And that way it prevents you from reincarnating or even going back to your body as Anunnaki or another type of being. So the ETs would not allow humanity to use nuclear weapons again against their own people. So that to me is a big no-no. If this would never happen, and if it may occur down the line, or there's an accident of some sort, they would try to prevent the accident rather than try and say, yeah, sure, go ahead. You know? So they would definitely try to prevent that, but it doesn't mean that they would prevent other types of disasters if they occur. I was talking about the New World Order and the Illuminati potentially having some artificial means of killing us if they want to reduce the size of the population as one. I don't know if they would intervene to do with that. I think they may or they might, but I think we'd be smart enough to change the course of history as time goes by, because we're already awakening, like Derrick said earlier, we're already awakening to those changes. Like we have the star children and we have the crystal children. We are all part as a whole. We are now becoming more aware. Derrick talked about social media. It is true that through social media, people are listening to these kind of stories as well. They are becoming more aware, more empathic towards what's going on. Things now, like even children will talk about things that we never used to talk about as children ourselves. As a different same generation, or we can see those changes. Like some kids will say, "Oh, you shouldn't be eating such foods or these sort of things because it's bad for you." Like again, there's an awareness around many things, many topics today that we didn't have notions of as we were growing up. So, or this was forgotten. Now it's coming back into our consciousness, and I think that's part of a whole. So I think we are becoming smarter in a way, not in all ways, but we're also seeing like governments, like you can see French people protesting in Paris and all over France with the gilets jaunes and all of that. So they are definitely trying to now show a certain disrespect to their own government for saying, you know what, enough is enough. Now we are more aware than we used to be, and we want things to change, because you can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over to repeat history, pretty much, because people are becoming more aware of those changes. And I think that's what I like to see. I think it's already happening, and if I'm helping in one way or the other, in a small way, I'm happy. I can't do the whole job for the whole planet. I'm not Jesus, but at least it doesn't matter what I do. If I can help one person on this planet, that's already my job done.
You're the helper.
So Derrick, last night you had a very interesting experience where you saw a UFO hovering over your house. Can you tell us about that?
Well, living in Surrey, British Columbia, and the date today is, what's today's date?
January 14th.
Okay, 2019. Last night, I went outside for some reason Spirit said to me, go outside. So I went outside, and it was at nighttime, and the sky was clear for once. Normally the weather's always raining. And so I went outside, and I went in my backyard, because it's nice and dark out there, because I'm right next to the forest, because we have all cedar trees, and our park is right next to us. So I went outside, looked at the sky, and I go, okay guys, you'd like to hear from you sometime. I haven't seen you guys in a while. So I'm looking at the sky, and just sitting back and watching, and then I start watching, the stars in some areas. Some are actually start to show themselves, and then all of a sudden I see this going across. I'm going like, oh, that's not a star. And it really got cool looking, and then it went flash, just bursted, like shows, like it's like, here we go, you asked for me, here we are. And I go like, hey, cool. And I was like, thank you. And then they went off, and then apparently appreciated it, and they took off. And then this morning or this afternoon, you got a call that someone actually videotaped it.
Yes, I got a call that there's someone out here in Surrey last night that they were with their mother, and they saw a UFO here in Surrey.
Yeah.
They came down very close, and they took a picture of it.
Yeah.
And they told me, I was absolutely amazed at what you told me, because it correlated perfectly.
Yeah, because it looked like that screen, like it was huge in the sky. It was bright, and it was like it was just doing this wave, and then it went burst. And I went, when you get a burst, they're just standing there acknowledging you. And it felt pretty cool.
And you said that you had a communication with them. Or was it because they were preparing you for today, or because of what we're talking about?
It's because preparing me, because let me know. And then through when I was sleeping, before I woke up this morning, I seen them again. They came through my dream time, and they were showing themselves to me. And they came down, and they said that they're thanking me and thanking Sebastian and you for this to happen, because apparently the message, this is kind of cool, because I seen the orb was up in the sky, and it came down and it landed in my hand, like the orb was in my hand. And they said, and it shows me a note, it looked like a pad, and when it crossed my hand, they said, share your information now. Now's the time. And I got excited, went, what does it say? Like, what else does it say? And all of a sudden I opened my eyes and went, I lost it. Like you're just looking at, focusing on it, all of a sudden you get excited, and you're just open your eyes. And I thought, oh well, now I know. They're just saying now is the time. So those that will see this film are going to be absolutely happy to see it.
Now I have to ask you both, how can everyone watching on the other side of that screen find you both? Do you have a website, social media that you were just talking about?
Myself, if they want to find me, my website is whiteskycloud.com. Go there, or also you can make me a friend on Facebook, Derrick Whiteskycloud, DERRICK, Whiteskycloud, all one word on Facebook. If you want to make contact with me, love to hear from you. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I do besides just being a psychic medium.
And how about you, Sebastian? How can everyone find you?
Well, they can reach me through nsuho, so it's nsuho.com, and they can reach me through the contact page, or they can also go on social media through the nsuho page, or Sebastien Martin. So Sebastian in French, Sebastien, and then Martin, Martin.
And remember, everyone watching, to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. If you like it, drop a comment below. I'm Jonny Enoch. Thanks for watching.